17 days before my brother James's wedding, my parents sent me 5 conditions for the privilege of attending. Sign away my claims, give up my share of Seabrook House, pay $25,000, stay silent, then apologize in front of 300 guests. Their final line read, "Do all 5, and we'll let you come." I smiled, declined every condition, booked a beach suite in Malibu, and mailed James one last gift. He opened it under the ballroom lights, expecting my surrender. Instead, he screamed for the screen to go black because the box contained proof of something even his bride had never suspected about him. The first strange payment appeared on a Tuesday morning at Seabrook House. The old place always smelled like salt, cedar, and the cinnamon rolls our grandmother used to bake when James and I were kids. Her wooden keepsake box still sat on the shelf above my desk, the brass hinge worn pale from years of opening and closing. Inside was a photograph of James and me at 16 and 12, barefoot on the porch, grinning like nothing in the world could ever divide us. I was reviewing the property books when a monthly payment caught my eye. It was too large to be a vendor bill and too regular to be a repair expense. I circled it once, then again. James handled promotions. I handled the money. That arrangement existed for a reason. Growing up, James was the child everyone rushed to protect. When he quit college halfway through a semester, Mom called it burnout. When he left a job after 4 months, Dad said the manager had failed to appreciate him. When his rent came due, I paid it because Mom told me he was embarrassed to ask. I was always the strong one. At Thanksgiving, James could arrive an hour late and still find his plate covered in foil, waiting beside Dad's chair. I would be in the kitchen fixing a leaking faucet, finding extra batteries, or calming Mom after James mentioned another business problem over pumpkin pie. "You're good in a crisis," Dad would say, squeezing my shoulder. It sounded like praise until I realized it usually meant someone else had created the crisis, and I was expected to absorb it. Still, I loved my brother. I helped him build his event business. I introduced him to clients, reviewed contracts, and covered 2 months of expenses when a major booking fell through. Every time. He promised he would repay me once things settled down. Things never settled down. They simply became my responsibility. That was why I did not call him immediately about the payment. I wanted facts before another family conversation turned into a lecture about loyalty. I pulled the prior statements, lined them across my desk, and found the same charge repeating month after month. Outside, wind pressed against the windows. The glass over our childhood photograph caught the light, placing my reflection over James's smiling face. Then I opened the payment details. The account was tied to a loan secured by Seabrook House, and someone had signed my name. The email arrived 17 days before the wedding, just after I poured my first cup of coffee. The subject line said, "Family unity before Saturday, for 1 second." I thought my parents were finally ready to talk. Then I opened it. There were 5 conditions. First, I had to withdraw every financial complaint involving James. Second, I had to sign a confidentiality agreement. Third, I had to surrender my half of Seabrook House. Fourth, I had to contribute $25,000 toward the wedding. Fifth, I had to read a public apology for damaging family harmony. At the bottom, Dad had written, "Complete all 5, and we'll let you attend." I read that sentence twice. Not invite you, not welcome you, let you attend. As if being James's sister was a privilege they could revoke. There was an attachment with a deadline set for midnight. I opened it and read slowly. By page 6, my hands had gone cold. The agreement did more than silence me. It released James, my parents, and anyone connected to the loan from responsibility for earlier financial decisions, if I signed. The forged debt would become harder to challenge. If I gave up Seabrook House, James would control the collateral. If I paid the $25,000, I would help cover wedding bills tied to the borrowed money. And if I apologized before 300 guests, they could later say I had admitted I was the problem. The 5 conditions were not about peace. They were a cleanup plan. I called James. He answered on the 4th ring with music behind him. "Did you know about this?" I asked. He sighed. Jolie, please don't start. I'm asking whether you knew our parents were making me sign away my property to attend your wedding. You're twisting it, then untwist it. He went quiet. Finally, he said, everyone is trying to protect one day from becoming about you. The words landed harder than I expected. I looked toward Grandma's wooden box beneath our old photograph. This is not about one day, I said. Someone used my name on a loan. You would have approved it eventually. No, I wouldn't. You always make everything sound criminal. I lowered my voice. Did you sign my name? He did not answer. Instead, he said, act like family for once. The call ended with him telling me to think carefully about what I was willing to lose. I did. I thought about the ballroom seat they were holding over my head. I thought about the apology they wanted on the screen. I thought about how many years I had confused being needed with being loved. Then I typed 4 words. I decline all 5. I sent it before I could soften it. Next, I booked a suite in Malibu for the wedding weekend. The confirmation appeared beside the unsigned agreement as the deadline kept counting down. Midnight was not coming for me. It was coming for them. Megan placed 2 stacks of paper on the dining table in my Malibu suite. This pile, she said, tapping the left, is what your family says happened. Then she touched the right. And this is what you can prove. The room smelled like coffee, sea air, and printer ink. I had booked Malibu to escape the wedding, but the table looked more like an audit room than a vacation. Megan had known me since graduate school. She never confused loyalty with obedience. Do you want them to understand you? She asked. Or protect yourself both? You may not get them in that order. So I started with protection. My attorney, Hannah Collins, reviewed the disputed loan and notified the lender that I had never approved it. She requested a freeze on additional borrowing tied to Seabrook House. Then we followed the money. The loan was approximately $250,000. About $95,000 had gone into James's event business. $70,000 had been transferred into Grace's restaurant project. $45,000 covered wedding bills. $30,000 moved through my parents' business before returning to James as a family gift. Grace's name made me stop. She had always said her restaurant was built without family money. If James had lied. She was walking toward the altar without knowing what financed her future. The signature records were worse. My name had been entered from the internet connection at James's office. The identity questions used details only close relatives would know. My first employer. The street where we grew up. The month Grandma died. The lender had received a copy of my identification. I remembered giving it to Mom the year before. She said an insurance agent needed updated records when I called. She answered too quickly. I never gave James permission to use it. That is not what I asked. She paused. This family cannot survive an investigation. Later, Megan found a planning sheet James had shared months earlier. It listed Seabrook House under future ownership. James, sole manager. Grace, future investor. Jolie, released interest. Beside my name, he had written, she'll sign to keep the invitation. I stared until the screen dimmed. He had not hoped I would agree. He had budgeted for my fear. The final piece was a voice message James had sent after drinking at a conference. I had ignored it then. Now his laughter sounded different. He said I would be angry for a few weeks, then fix everything like I always did. Not because he misunderstood me, because he understood the pattern perfectly. That evening, Hannah reviewed every item. Account numbers would be hidden. Full records would go only to those directly affected. I was not building a spectacle. I was removing a lie from the stage. The wedding program still listed my tribute. James had kept it because he expected an apology. The planner confirmed he wanted my gift opened last. So I packed Grandma's wooden box. On top, I placed our childhood photograph. Under it, I set 1 short letter and 3 sealed envelopes, one for Grace, one for my parents, and one for James. At the bottom went a video containing dates, payments, and his own words. The courier lifted the box from my hands. For 1 second. I almost called him back. Then the elevator doors closed. and the last secret my family expected me to protect began traveling toward the wedding. The first thing I heard through the live stream was the clink of champagne glasses. Then the MC stepped onto the stage. Our final family tribute comes from the groom's sister, Jolie, who couldn't be with us tonight. More than 300 guests turned toward the walnut box. James rose, wearing the wounded expression he used whenever he wanted sympathy. "My sister and I have had a difficult few weeks," he said, "but family deserves forgiveness." People applauded. From my sofa in Malibu, I watched him untie the ribbon. He thought I had surrendered. He opened the box. Our childhood photograph rested on top. James lifted it and smiled. Then he saw the envelope marked "Read Aloud." The MC unfolded the page. "James, 17 days before your wedding. Our parents gave me 5 conditions in exchange for permission to attend." The applause faded into uncertain taps. Ice shifted inside a glass. The MC continued. "I was required to withdraw my complaints, surrender my share of Seabrook House, pay $25,000, sign away my right to speak, and apologize publicly for refusing to accept a debt I never approved." James grabbed for the page. "Give me that." But the ballroom screen had already changed. The email appeared behind him. "Do all 5. And we'll let you come." Mom stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "This is private." The next screen highlighted the release buried inside the agreement. It showed that the document was not about peace. It protected James, my parents, and everyone connected to the loan from claims involving financial decisions. Dad moved toward the control table. "Turn this off. These documents are out of context." Then the wedding schedule appeared. Tribute from the groom's sister. Final presentation. Approved by James Parker. The planner blocked Dad. "The presentation is running exactly as approved," she said. Grace opened the envelope with her name on it. "Why is my restaurant listed here?" The screen changed again. A loan of approximately $250,000, about $95,000 into James's business, $70,000 into Grace's restaurant project, $45,000 toward wedding bills, $30,000 through my parents' business, the remainder in fees and overdue payments. Grace tightened her grip on the paper. "You told me that money came from your company." "It did." "No, it passed through your company." He reached for her arm. She stepped back. Then the recording began. James's own voice filled the ballroom. He said I would be angry for a few weeks, then fix everything like I always did. The next screen showed the line he had written months earlier. "Jolie will sign to keep the invitation." James spun toward the control table. "Turn it off, nobody moved. Turn it off, now." His voice cracked. The fear on his face had nothing to do with the box. It came from watching Grace read the truth without him controlling the explanation. She looked at him. "Did you use Jolie's name without her permission?" James glanced at our parents. Mom began to speak. Grace raised one hand. I asked James. He swallowed. She would have agreed eventually. Grace's expression hardened. "Did you lie to me about the investment I was protecting what we were building?" "That is not an answer." Dad stepped forward. "This is a family misunderstanding." The screen displayed the disputed signature, the connection to James's office, and the notice sent to the lender. The credit line had been frozen. No more money could be drawn against Seabrook House. Grace asked one question. "Were you planning to take Jolie's share after the wedding James stopped pretending?" "She has money. Losing half that property would not destroy her." That sentence exposed everything, because I could survive the loss. He believed he had the right to cause it. Grace removed her engagement ring and placed the box beside Grandma's wooden one. "There will be no wedding today." James looked at her, then at the guests, waiting for someone to rescue him. No one did. The screen went black, leaving only the date. 2 boxes sat beneath it. One held a ring for a future built on a lie. The other held the truth that ended it. The folding crew was still carrying white chairs out of the ballroom when the lender removed James's access to every account tied to Seabrook House. That was the first consequence. It was not the last. Within 48 hours, Grace's attorney confirmed she was ending the engagement. She replaced the disputed investment in her restaurant with legitimate funding and separated every contract, account, and vendor from James, She sent me a short letter. "I'm sorry I benefited from money I never questioned." I believed her. We did not become friends. Some endings are cleaner when they do not pretend to be new beginnings. James's event business began collapsing almost immediately. Clients who had trusted him with large deposits asked for records. 2 paused their contracts. Others left after learning the property account had been frozen. For years, James had survived by making every problem look temporary. This one had dates, numbers, and his signature trail. The investigation confirmed that my identification had been used without permission and that the disputed approval came from his office. He lost management access to Seabrook House and was ordered to repay the money connected to the unauthorized loan. The legal process took months, not minutes. James accepted a restitution agreement and long-term financial supervision, consequences he could no longer pass to anyone else in the family. That mattered to me. I did not want a dramatic punishment invented for one satisfying night. I wanted responsibility that lasted after the flowers were removed and the guests stopped talking. My parents faced their own consequences. Dad admitted he had reviewed the agreement designed to silence me. He stepped down from 2 community boards after people began asking why a man known for talking about integrity had pressured his daughter to surrender her rights. Mom admitted she had given James the copy of my identification. They sold a vacation property and used personal savings to repay the portion of the money that had passed through their business. Mom still called the wedding presentation cruel. Dad still described their choices as desperate. Neither of them could explain why desperation had always required me to pay. The court placed James's share of Seabrook House under supervision until the debt was resolved. I became temporary manager because the records had to be rebuilt and the business had to keep running. The first morning I returned. The property smelled like wet cedar and coffee. No phone was ringing with one of James's emergencies. No one was waiting for me to make a lie easier to live with. Months later, the wedding planner mailed Grandma's wooden box back to me. The ribbon was gone, but the photograph was still inside. I repaired the cracked frame and placed it on the shelf above my desk. The box sat beneath it, closed but unlocked. I could remember the brother in that picture without giving the man he became access to my life for the first time. Peace did not feel like keeping everyone together. It sounded like waves against the pilings, a quiet office, and my own name on records no one else could touch. A year after the canceled wedding, I returned to Malibu and set Grandma's wooden box on the balcony table. The ocean smelled clean below me. Waves folded against the shore with the same rhythm I heard the night James opened it. His last message arrived weeks earlier. "You got everything." I answered once. No, I kept what was mine. Then I blocked him. I still missed the boy in the photograph. Missing him did not mean I owed the man he became another chance to use me. My parents wanted counseling. I agreed to 1 session. Dad said they had leaned on me because I was the strongest. I told him strength is not consent. That is what I learned. Love does not charge admission. Family does not get to demand your silence, money, or dignity as proof that you belong. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop protecting people from the consequences they created. If you have ever had to protect yourself from someone you still loved, share your story in the comments. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one.